Alright, so back here on the 1978 Toyota pickup. So, that bulge that I had in the bed, so you see I got that taken care of, so I don't have that pot belly going on anymore. So what I ended up doing is I drilled out all the spot welds along the entire length. So a lot of them were rotted out, so it didn't much matter, but just used the die grinder and hit down the spot welds on everything, popped it all off, and then you can see, here are all the spots that I hit afterwards. So, got it tacked all the way down. The welds are a bit bigger than they were from the factory, so hopefully that should be just fine. And then, while I had it pried off, I just hit it with some self-etching primer and a little bit of spray paint, because there's no way afterwards to get in there. There's no chance I'm seam welding this, and I probably won't even try to seam seal it. There's going to be so much movement and flex and everything in here that probably any kind of sealing I try to do is just going to end up holding moisture in. And so, I'm just going to leave that be. When I was in there digging around and just sort of looking at other stuff, this side looks pretty much fine. But you can tell the other side there, you can see some daylight through there. And so, gonna have some repair to do on the bed, but I already knew that was coming, so no big deal. So that's way better now. When I try to set the body on it, it's so much easier because I don't have that pot belly pushing the cab around as I'm trying to drop it. So it slides in there way nicer than before. So that's good. Things that are kind of annoying me, my shop is leaking. Obviously, I'm getting some moisture in here, and my panels that I put in are getting some surface rust on them, which just means I got to knock it off. I'm obviously this isn't even close to ready for paint, so I got to go over everything anyway. But it's just annoying to have rust on them new panels. I live in the desert, so I don't like that really much. So back over here, so trying to get an idea of where the engine's going to set in here. I've been nibbling away the firewall and seeing what I got to end up doing. You can see this hook is hitting up under this right here. I measured everything, and these hooks are about the same height as all the pieces that got to end up bolting to the engine. So all of the intake pieces and injectors that are on this side, the turbos and exhausts that are on the other side, as far as like the height of the engine, those hooks represent about the top of the height of the engine. If I take, obviously the back is fine, and if I take a board and set it across here, you see I got, probably about 1 inch or so of clearance to that hook. And that's where the hood will end up setting, and so that's going to be okay. Tapers down a little bit, but as we get to that timing cover there, it looks like there's going to be plenty of clearance. So as far as the height, that's going to be okay, which is good news, because I thought I was going to have to notch the cross member. So you can see down there, where the pan is. And so the pan right now is setting on top of the cross member a little bit. Might have to just notch it a little bit. So I thought I was going to have to do a big old fat notch in there, which I was not excited about. But it looks like here now, like I got it set in here, I might just notch it just a slight amount. After, looking at all the stuff, I thought maybe there was a chance that this is the rear sump pan that I swapped in here. That's the front sump one over there that I took off. When I was playing around with the settings, I thought maybe I'd be able to run this motor a lot further forward and then put the front sump back on it, but there's no chance. Like, it's not even close to being able to fit for the front sump. So The rear sump pan's in there, and I'm pretty sure that that's going to work just fine. Like I said, it's currently on top of the cross member, which is no good. Yeah, I do need some clearance there for movement, and you can see that, like I said, like my clearance to the hook and the timing cover and everything is pretty tight already. So I do think the engine, if it was down like another inch from where it is right now, I'd feel a lot more comfortable. As far as setting back for where it is, so the transmission and the shifter is 26 inches back from the bell housing, which puts me right here. And so the engine, it can't go any further back than this. I already tried setting the seat in here, and having the shifter right here is perfectly fine. I'm pretty short, so if it's good enough for me, whatever, I don't care. And so having the shifter right here is going to work just fine. And so that's where about as far back as I could possibly put the engine. Like it can't go any further back than where it is right now. In fact, it'd be nice if I would push it forward a little bit more, because you can see, the amount of mess I'm going to have with trying to get, all these things to fit up in here. I mean, now my valve covers are inside of where the original firewall was. There's all kinds of hoses and pipe that come along this side that move coolant and oil and stuff around. So, obviously the bell housing of the transmission comes out and down. And so, like, all this is going to have to get cut out. There's no way that engine's dropping down further enough in order to get that bell housing. Like, I mean, you can see the engine would have to drop like 6 inches, and that's no way in hell is happening. And so, I'll be removing a bunch of this transmission tunnel when I'm getting closer to that, in order to get the transmission bolted up. But right now I'm just worried about the engine. Looking at some other stuff, like, I thought maybe I'd need to have an oil filter relocation kit when I was looking at this previously. The old top hats and everything stuck way above the frame, and they were hitting up against the oil filter. But this will be actually awesome. Like, just change the filter. Like, that'll be kick-ass to be able to do an oil change on this. So that's good. Like, there's some other components and stuff that bolt in on this side. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to have plenty of room on this side of it. And so the problem, obviously, I mean, I got to cut a bunch out for the transmission tunnel. You can see this is where the steering comes through previously, and then the steering rack like comes down through here, and it comes pretty close to the frame. It's like right underneath where the oil filter's at. I do have enough room in order to get like a little joint on there. And so it'll have to probably be like 2 joints, like one coming off this way, and then the steering is going to come through here. And, certainly I got my oil filter in the way. Maybe I need to use the relocation kit that I bought and move the oil filter down here somewhere. But you can see, like, where the column, that's where the original column came through. And, it's going to be tight to this, and this is, this little section right here is where the new rack and pinion sits. And so, this will be an interesting problem to try to solve. I'm not sure what I'm going to end up doing for the column and the joints and everything, but it looks like I'll probably need 2. I'll need one right up around where the rack is, because the rack sits pretty close to the frame, and then I'll probably need another one up here next to the firewall in order to get that angle squared away. So that'll be some work. The other accessories that bolt along here, that this piece of firewall is definitely going to have to get out of here, because the intake and injectors and all that stuff, I think are about 6 or 7 inches wide, and certainly it's going to get up inside of this firewall. And so I'm going to have to be cutting out even more of it. I'll probably be getting all the way out here. You know, this is where the brake master sits, and now you're looking like, where the hell are you gonna where are you gonna mount your clutch master? So yeah, certainly got some mess on my hands, so we'll see what ends up happening. So there's all those things to worry about on that side. That's obviously the complicated side with the brakes and all that other crap. This side where the turbos are at, you know, shouldn't be much of an issue. So where the water pump hooks in, you know, a little 90 here to over to the radiator shouldn't be a big deal. You know, this is where all the turbos and everything are at. You can see same sort of story here. I think this side is 8 inches, and so I'll be getting into this, probably cutting all this stuff out of here. These are the ports for where the radiator, I'm sorry, the heater core would hook in for the HVAC. And so, you know, gotta keep them, or if I gotta cut that out, no big deal. So I'd probably end up losing this whole section up in here. But there's not much going on this side. So these are some of the water lines. There's some oil lines that come through. Turbo's got to get the oil feed and oil return and all that stuff. And so this side's not quite as complicated. So not as much crap to worry about. You see, I took all the accessories off, and so I got a bucket of accessories over here. So, you know, timing cover and alternator and power steering pump and everything, I took all that off just to make it easier to move this thing around, take a little bit of weight off of it, and, you know, just make it easier to get stuff through. There should be plenty of room over here. Like, I'm not worried about this at all. Like, the alternator will bolt in here, power steering, no problem. You know, the AC, which I don't know if this car will ever have AC, would bolt down there. So I'm not worried about that. The water pump, so there's a pulley that sticks out on the front of this, and it's in front of this spline just a little bit. And so if I'm looking down the front of the engine, you know, that's the part that sticks out the furthest. So the thing that I gotta make sure I have as much clearance in front of would be the water pump pulley that sits at the front of the engine. And this is where I got a mess. So I think all the rest of it I should be able to figure out. Cut more metal, make room for the trans tunnel, you know, where it's setting, a little bit of notch in the member. That's all. I ain't worried about any of that. But this, so the radiator is 6 inches wide, and I need a little bit of room. So you can't just be jamming the radiator up against the pulley. I mean, you need at least an inch of clearance between the radiator and the front of the engine, just for airflow and, you know, making sure that, you know, the fan for the radiator is working fine, and, you know, you don't have to worry about, like, the motor mounts shifting around or something and then get your engine crashing into your radiator. So I need at least an inch of clearance here, and so then I'm looking at like 7 inches. And so 7 inches is going to be hard to come by. If we look at the front of this thing right here, you know, 7 inches is coming deep into the front core support. And so, you know, obviously, like, there's that 7 inches ain't happening, like, to the top, right? So now I'd be getting into, like, the hood release. These are the mounts for the grill. And so, like, this, I'd have to go to, like, a pinned hood and figure out some wonky-ass way in order to get the hood release to work, and that would be a mess. So I think I'll end up running the radiator up underneath this piece, and so I'll butt it up against the bottom of it to keep it out of the hood release, keep it out of the grill, keep it all out of that stuff. If we look here, you know, I got my 7 inches I need. If I take that all the way to the front of where the grill comes, and the grill bolts to the front of this little tab, and I'll get my 7 inches if I just get it right up to the front of where the grill is. And so if I get the top of the radiator here, then I got to get 18 inches from the top is where I got to get in order to make sure that I can get the radiator in here, which, oh joy, that means that I'm getting myself into the bottom of the frame as well. So if I run that up underneath everything here, I'm now getting myself into the bottom piece as well. So I can probably keep the bottom part of the frame. I'm going to have to cut this top piece, and then all this whole core support here, that's all got to go. And then all along the sides, the radiator's 26 inches wide. I got to get all that out. So, yeah, that's what I'm looking at. So, I mean, the motor's got to be where the motor's got to be based on the shifter and everything else. Like, I can't bring it any further forward, because then I wouldn't have a chance in hell of getting a radiator in there. I can't put it any further back, because then the shifter, when it comes through that hole, you'd be reaching behind you to shift, which would be dumb as hell. You know, then I'd be moving it. If I moved it any further back, you can already see, you know, my valve covers are already up underneath the firewall. You know, which means if I ever had to change valve cover gasket, like, you're taking the cab off in order to change a valve cover gasket, which is pretty lame. I already checked to see if I can get the rear spark plug, which is back here. And so I got a swivel attachment for my spark plug socket, and I can get in there just fine. But yeah, I mean, as far as like all the other little pieces, parts, you know, once you start getting that up underneath the firewall like that, like, it's going to be a shit show to try to do any maintenance on this. You know, I can't very well cut into this too much. I can cut into it, but that's where the wiper assembly sits inside of. So once I start cutting in to this here, then I'm, you know, making sure that I don't accidentally cut and bend some metal and do something, and then all of a sudden, you know, my wiper arms are hitting a thing and I ain't got wipers anymore. So yeah, I mean, this is definitely a lot of shit to deal with. And so, like I said, I got to get, you know, all this probably cut out. I'll do some more measurements of the intake and exhaust side to see how much I'm going to have to cut out. I might dry fit the intake on here in order to just make sure that I'll have enough room. You know, I might be cutting into this a little bit and, you know, bending in a little piece in order to remove this lip out of here, because you can see that obviously where it's at now, that's definitely not going to work with where that hook is jamming into that lip. So that's where we're at, trying to get that engine in there. Yeah, story of my life. Want to do something cool, and it's 10 times more complicated than I thought it was going to be, but, you know, we're still having fun. So, all right, well, that's it for this one. When you see me next, hopefully I'll have a bunch of shit cut out, and maybe you'll have the radiator mounted in there where it's going to end up being. So, all right, cool. Thanks. See you in the next one.